He turned and started to go back into his house. But the house use was also on fire. "No, no, not my house too. Don't burn beautiful house, help!" Sir Felton cried, and he ran back to Bowen fast. "Here, take this money, quickly, do something." Minutes later, Bowen and the peasants were ready. When the dragon flew over them, they started to throw things at him. This was the dragon's wonderful idea. He cried, "Oh, oh, oh." Then he slowly fell down from the sky and into a river near Sir Felton's house. "He's dying, he's dying," shouted the peasants. "Look, he's in the river." They all laughed happily, but Sir Felton looked very angry. "Get my money back," he shouted at them. "Run after that knight, he's got my money." The peasants ran after Sir Bowen as fast as they could. Bowen didn't wait. He quickly jumped onto his horse near the river and rode away. With Sir Felton's money in his hand, he laughed loudly. "We did it. It was easy. Clever dragon." He looked down at the money. "Now let's see. How much have we got?" A long way down the river, the dragon's head came up out of the water. He swam round and waited for Sir Bowen. When the knight saw him, he called, "Well, dragon, your idea was wonderful. They think you're dead. And we made a lot of money." "There's a lot of money in the world, knight," answered the dragon sadly. "You'll find it all, and then you won't want me." "No, dragon," answered Bowen. "I'm a knight of the old code. I'll never forget you." The dragon swam round in the river. He looked up at the knight on his horse. "You've got Sir Felton's money, but do you feel bad now?" he asked. "You didn't really kill me." Bowen looked down at the dragon. "No, I don't feel bad. Sir Felton doesn't live by the old code. He's cruel to the peasants." "Yes, but when you took his money, he was angry. And he'll be angry with the peasants now. They'll have to work harder and harder. And he won't pay them a penny," answered the dragon. "That's not my problem," shouted Bowen. "You don't understand the old code. You're only a dragon." "All right, don't be angry, knight," said the dragon quietly. "I do know about the old code, and I know you tried to live by it." "Yes, but nobody wanted to listen to me. So now I'm not going to try," answered Bowen sadly. "I can't change the world, dragon." The dragon's eyes were as sad and tired as Bowen's. They started moving down the river again. When evening came, the dragon and Bowen stopped for dinner. They were near cruel King Einan's castle. Bowen was hungry and ate quickly. The dragon waited and then asked, "Why do you hate dragons, knight?" "I don't hate all dragons," Bowen answered. "I hate one dragon and I wanted to kill him. But I never found him. And now I'll never find him. You're the last dragon, so he's dead." "Tell me," said the dragon quietly, "why did you hate that dragon?" "He only had half a heart," Bowen answered. "He gave the other half to King Einan, but it made Einan cruel and bad. When he had the dragon's heart, he forgot the old code. He killed peasants, and he was as cruel as his father, King Freyne." The dragon listened, and he began to look very angry. "Einan was bad before he met that dragon," he shouted. "He was cruel before he got half the dragon's heart." Bowen stood up quickly. "How do you know that?" he asked. The dragon knew because he was the great dragon in the mountain. He gave Einan half his heart, but he didn't want to discuss that with Bowen. "Well, all dragons know that," he said. "They know that Einan was a cruel child, and now he's a cruel king." Bowen didn't like this. The dragon's words made him unhappy. "No, I knew Einan when he was little. He was a good boy. I taught him the old code, he cried. Then he was cruel to you too, said the dragon. He stood nose to nose with Bowen. He broke your heart, and he broke the kind dragon's heart too. No, dragon, he didn't, shouted Sir Bowen. Oh, stop calling me dragon. I've got a name, you know. What is it then, dragon? Asked Bowen. Well, I can't say it in your language, answered the dragon. Go on, try, said Bowen. Ar, ar, ow, sh. You're right, laughed Bowen. I can't say that. He turned to put some more wood on the fire. With his back to the dragon, he suddenly heard a sad sound. He turned and saw the dragon on the ground. Ah, it hurts, said the dragon. He closed his eyes and put his hand on his heart. Bowen could see a red light near the dragon's heart. He quickly put some water on the light, and the dragon slowly opened his eyes. Thank you. I'm all right now, he said. What was it? Asked Bowen. Oh, nothing. I had a bad accident once, and it hurts sometimes. I hope our conversation didn't make you unhappy, said Bowen. It wasn't you, said the dragon. Not you. That night Bowen sat next to the dragon for a long time. He watched the red light near the dragon's heart. The color got slowly weaker and weaker. In the middle of the night, the dragon opened his eyes. Why aren't you asleep? He asked when he saw Bowen. I didn't want to sleep. I wanted to think of a name for you, answered Bowen. And I found a name up there. Can you see those stars? The dragon looked up at the sky. Yes, he said. We call those stars Draco, said Bowen. In our language, Draco is the same as dragon. And would you like to call me Draco? Laughed the dragon. No, you're right, it's a stupid idea, said Bowen with his head down. No, said the dragon kindly. It's not stupid. I like the name Draco. Thank you, knight, and have you got a name? Yes, my name's Bowen. Thank you, Bowen, said Draco, and he put his arm round the knight. Chapter 7. A sad day for Kara. King Einan sat on his horse and looked at his new castle. Good. The peasants are working hard, he thought. I was right. This is going to be the biggest and most beautiful castle in the world. Below him, the peasants worked hard in the hot sun. They were all hungry and thirsty, but they couldn't stop work. Kara, Redbeard's beautiful daughter, walked round with a large bucket of water. She gave the men a drink when she spoke to them. She wore old, dark clothes, but she looked lovely with her long red hair and kind face. Kara went to an old man. It was her father, Redbeard. His hair and beard were gray now. He wore old clothes, too, and his hands and arms were dirty. Drink, father, Kara said. She looked at her father's eyes. Cruel King Einan burnt your eyes, dear father, but you have to eat and drink. Kara, don't come here, it's dangerous. Please go home, said the old man when he heard his daughter. No, father, I'm not listening to you. Drink, Kara said. The old man put his hand up to her face. You're not a child now. You're a woman, a beautiful woman, Redbeard said. One day the king or one of his knights will see you, and they'll want you. Go home, Kara. You're my home, father, answered Kara. Now drink this. And she gave the old man a cup of water. Suddenly a sword pushed the cup out of Redbeard's hand. Kara looked up. In front of her she saw Einan and his knights on their horses. That was clever, King Einan, laughed Sir Felton. Now try the water bucket. There, behind the stupid old peasant. Einan laughed and pushed the bucket with his sword. The water went over Redbeard. "Don't move, father," said Kara quietly. She left her father and went to King Einon and Sir Felton. The knight threw his sword down hard at Kara's feet, but she wasn't afraid. "Look at the girl!" shouted Einon. "What are you doing?" "My father's an old man, King Einon," Kara cried. "He can't fight you now. Please don't hurt him." "Don't hurt him?" Einon shouted and quickly moved nearer Redbeard. Then he pushed his sword hard into the peasant's heart. "Father!" shouted Kara and ran to the old man on the ground. Einon watched and smiled. "Your father's dead," he laughed. Kara had Redbeard in her arms. Her beautiful, long red hair fell down her back. Einon looked at her. He remembered the girl's lovely hair, but not her name. "Who is she?" he thought. "She's beautiful. What's her name? Where does she come from?" Then he turned his horse and started to ride away. Kara looked down at her father, dead in her arms. Then she looked up at Einon and his knights on their horses. "I hate that cruel man," she said quietly. "He killed my father. I'll never forget that. One day." Chapter 8. Kara meets Draco. At his castle, King Einon sat down to dinner. His knights and their wives ate with him. At the end of the table, his mother, Queen Aislinn, sat quietly. The other men and women at the table were loud and noisy. Suddenly Einon turned round. He saw somebody behind him with a knife in his hand. The man threw the knife at the king, but he was ready. Einon caught him and pushed him down onto the table. Then Einon and Brock, the king's cruel knight, looked down at the man. But it wasn't a man. It was a woman. She had beautiful, long red hair. It was Kara. "I know you," Einon said. "You're Redbeard's child." Then he turned to Queen Aislinn. "Look at her, mother. She tried to kill me." The queen looked at her son, but she didn't say a word. Einon looked at Kara. "I killed your father, girl," he said to her. "And now I'm going to kill you." "Kill me then." "I want to die," shouted Kara. "I don't want to live in this country. You're not my king." "So what shall I do with you? I'll think of something," Einon shouted at her. "Now take her away." Brock and some other knights quickly took Kara out of the room. Einon looked down at her knife in his hands, and then he looked at his mother. The queen watched him, but she said nothing. Einon threw the knife down on the table and looked into the hot fire. He thought for a minute. Then he suddenly stood up and ran out of the room. "Where is she? Where's that woman?" he shouted. He found Kara in a small, dark room in the bottom of the castle. "I remember you now," Einon shouted at her. "Your red hair at the battle, when my father the king died. It was your sword. It went through my heart." He opened his shirt. "Look, you did that. Now I'll find a way to hurt you." Kara looked into Einon's eyes. She wasn't afraid. "Next time I'll kill you," she shouted at him. "You can't. I've got a different heart now. It's very strong," answered Einon. "Your heart's black," Kara shouted. When he heard this, Einon looked at her with cruel eyes. "You wait," he said. "I'll think of something." Kara sat in the cold room and looked out of the small window. How could she get out? But then Queen Aislinn came quietly into the room. "You," Kara said. "How did you get in here?" "Shh, be quiet. I want to help you," said the queen. "I don't want any help from the mother of that cruel king," answered Kara. "I am Einon's mother," the queen said sadly. "But he had a father, too. I had to marry King Frayne, but I didn't want to be his wife. Einon's cruel because of his father, not me." Why didn't you kill him when he was a baby then? Shouted Kara. You can ask that now, the queen answered. But when a mother looks at the baby in her arms, she only sees her child. She doesn't know that he's going to be a cruel man. And now you want to help me, Kara said. All right, give me my knife, then I can die. Don't die now, my girl, when you can live, said the queen. Then she showed Kara a small door behind the fireplace. Only 3 people know about this door, she said. She opened it and quickly walked outside the castle walls with Kara. Can you see that road? The queen asked. Run away now, run fast. Kara turned to say thank you to Queen Aislinn, but she wasn't there. What? Dogs! Shouted Einon angrily. Stupid men, where's the girl? How did she get out? Einon threw his food and drink on the floor. Brock and Queen Aislinn watched him. Sir, there's only one way out of that room, Brock said. And only you, me, and the queen know about it. I know, shouted Einon. So how did the girl find the door? His eyes turned to his mother. It was her, he thought. She helped her. He shouted at Brock, Get your best men, quickly. Go and find her and bring her here fast. Brock ran out and the queen said quietly to her son, I'll ask somebody to clean up this room. Einon looked at his mother with cold, angry eyes. Kara ran away from the castle as fast as she could. When she arrived at her village, she told everybody her story. I've got a plan to kill the king. Will you help me? She asked the villagers. But they were afraid. They didn't want to hear her ideas. Her father, Redbeard, was dead. They didn't want to die too. Listen to me, we have to fight, said Kara. But the men shouted at her and started to hit her. Stop that, somebody behind them said. They turned and saw Sir Bowen on his horse. Then suddenly one of the men cried, Look up there. It was Draco, the dragon, high in the sky. You're late, thought Bowen. When he saw the dragon, Draco flew down near the village. Look at that fire, the men shouted. It's coming out of his nose. He's going to burn our village. Some of the villagers ran away into their houses, but Kara and the oldest man in the village stayed behind. Do you want me to kill this dragon? Bowen asked them. You'll have to pay me, or I'll leave him here. Kara looked very angry. I thought King Einon was cruel. But this night is worse, she said to the old man. Don't give him our money. Bowen looked hard at Kara and said to the old man, All right, don't give me any money. But why don't you give the dragon one of the village's lovely young women? Then he'll go away. The other men came out of their houses and listened to Bowen. Then they all looked at Kara. Yes, give her to the dragon, they shouted. Who's that girl? Asked Draco. The villagers want you to have her. Then you'll go away, answered Bowen. That's stupid. Who gave them that idea? Draco laughed. I don't know, Bowen said quietly. What are you waiting for? Quickly, go and eat her. Oh, please, said Draco. I feel ill. Yuck. But you ate Sir Eglamour. I saw him when I was in your mouth, said Bowen. Think of something, quickly. Draco put out his arms and pulled Kara away from the men in the village. Then he flew away with her into the sky. Everybody shouted and laughed. They were very happy. Thank you, Knight, thank you. Now we'll never see Kara or the dragon again. Chapter 9. Ready for Battle. That's lovely, Draco. Kara sat in the hot sun with a smile on her face. Draco sat next to her and sang his sad, strange song. And you're a lovely dragon. They're not all as kind as you are, said Kara. She felt warm and happy. How many dragons do you know then? Draco asked. You're the first, answered Kara. But you're funny. You don't eat young women, you sing to them. Do you do anything dangerous? No, said Draco. When people are kind to me, I never hurt them. Then why did you come to my village? Asked Kara. Good question, said somebody behind them. It was Bowen. You remember Kara's village, Draco. Why did you go there? Kara looked angrily at Bowen. Go away, knight, she shouted. You wanted this dragon to eat me. Then she got up and tried to fight Bowen. They fell into the river and Bowen shouted out, Help! Draco, why didn't you eat her? Draco smiled and answered, Kara, this is Sir Bowen. He won't hurt you. Bowen, meet Kara. Kara and Bowen stopped fighting and got out of the river, but before they could say anything, they heard the sound of horses. Draco heard them too, and quickly jumped into the water. Einan, Brock, and the king's other knights came out of the trees. Bowen ran in front of Kara. He didn't want them to see her. Kara looked at Bowen and suddenly remembered his face. He helped my father, she thought. When I was younger and Einan tried to burn out his eyes the first time, he was a good knight of the old code then. Why is he different now? But she didn't have time to think about that. Einan sat above her on his horse. He looked down at the girl and the knight. Ah, my old teacher, he said cruelly. And you've got my woman. I lost her, but here she is. I don't think she's your woman, King Einan. She doesn't want to come with you, answered Bowen. Oh, I'm sorry, but I'm not asking her. I'm telling her. She has to come, shouted Einan. My sword says she doesn't have to, said Bowen, and he pulled out his sword. Einan smiled and pulled out his sword too. Then the teacher and his students started to fight. They fell down but quickly stood up again in the river. They looked strong and dangerous with their swords in their hands. But Einan was younger and faster. Fight me, Bowen, he called. You're a knight of the old code, but nobody remembers the old code now. You're dead. His words made Bowen angrier. You remember the old code. It's your code too, you know, he shouted. Never. It was never my code, Einan shouted back. It was. You repeated the words of the old code to the dragon in the mountain, said Bowen. I only said those words because you wanted to hear them, laughed Einan. And I wanted to live. You taught me to fight and you taught me well, old knight. Then Einan brought his sword down hard on Bowen's arm. The knight fell down in the water. But before Einan could kill Bowen, Draco came out of the river opposite him. The great dragon stood above the king and looked down at him with his angry yellow eyes. Then Draco put up his arms, and Einan saw the red light on his heart. The king felt very afraid. He climbed out of the river fast and jumped onto his horse. Kara, Bowen, and Draco watched him, and Einan rode away. Kara helped Bowen out of the river. She sat near him on the ground and washed his arm. You're a very strong fighter, she said. Will you help the men in my village to fight Einan and his knights? You won't win, said Bowen. Einan will kill you. Kara looked at him angrily, then stood up. Will you fight with us, Draco? She asked the dragon. Draco looked at her sadly. For thousands of years, dragons helped people. There was one dragon, the greatest dragon in the world. He told the other dragons to help the people in this country. Can you see that star up there? When the old dragon died, that star was born. And after that, when other dragons died, new stars were born in the night sky. But then men stopped listening to the dragons. I wanted to do one wonderful thing for the people in this country. I wanted to be a star in the sky, too. But I made a bad mistake. I helped to make the world a worse place. Bowen listened to the dragon's sad words. It was you, he suddenly shouted. You're the dragon in the mountain. King Einan has half your heart. Yes, said Draco quietly. Einan will only die when I die. He's got half my heart. I wanted to help him. I wanted him to be good. But my heart didn't change him. I was stupid. No, you weren't, said Bowen kindly. I wanted to help Einan too. I wanted to teach him the old code, but I couldn't. Then Draco turned to Kara. Yes, I'll fight Einan with you, Kara, he said. I'd like to help you. Come with us, Bowen. The knight thought for a minute. Then he stood up and they all started to walk back to Kara's village. When they arrived there, Kara asked the villagers to help her. She wanted them to fight Einan and kill him, but the men were angry and afraid. They shouted at her and began to hit her again. Suddenly somebody said, Well, I'm going to fight Einan. The men looked round. There, on his horse in the morning sun, was Sir Bowen. He had fire in his eyes and a smile on his face. Only you, knight, shouted the men. And Draco, said Bowen. From behind a bridge, Draco flew down to the village. The men looked at Bowen and then at Draco. One of them shouted, I'm going to fight too. I want to fight Einan with this knight and the dragon. The other villagers listened and then they started to shout too. Kill Einan! Kill the cruel king! We want to fight! For weeks, everybody in the village got ready for the battle. On the last night, the villagers gave Bowen a beautiful new sword. It shone in the firelight. On it was a picture of Draco. The dragon looked wonderful. Bowen couldn't say anything. He stood in the middle of the village and looked at the men round him. Then he looked at Draco and Kara and saw the love in his friend's eyes. You're ready for battle tomorrow, he said to everybody. And you're ready to win back your country, and the greatest dragon in the world is going to help you. Chapter 10. A new star in the sky. It was the day of the great battle. King Einan and his knights looked out of the castle windows. There are hundreds of peasants down there, called Brock. They're ready to fight. Then let's go, answered Sir Felton. One of us is as strong as 100 of them. Don't be stupid, Einan shouted at him. They've got Sir Bowen with them, and the dragon. Queen Aislinn came into the room. Don't be afraid of the dragon, my son, she said quietly to Einan. Einan turned to her. I'm not afraid of anything, he said. But it's strange, you know, Mother. Sometimes the dragon feels very near me. Come with me, son, said the queen, and walked out of the room. Einan followed and saw 5 great strong knights outside. These men are for you, my son. They're the strongest in the world, the queen said. The strongest what? Einan asked. The strongest dragon killers, answered his mother. Einan took his mother's hand. He looked into her eyes and thanked her warmly. The king then went back to his knights. Below them they could see Bowen and the peasants. Look at them, shouted Einan angrily. They're at my castle walls. Well, today Bowen's going to die and the old code will die with him. Bowen rode up and down outside the castle and looked up at Einan. Come down and fight, he shouted. Einan heard him and felt very angry. Suddenly Draco flew down into the castle. The fire from the dragon's nose burnt the king's buildings and men. Einan watched and shouted, We can't stay here. We'll all burn. Let's go outside and fight those stupid peasants. He and his knights quickly ran down the stairs. They jumped on their horses and rode out of the castle. Einan, on his great white horse, pulled out his father's sword. "Right, let's kill them," he shouted to his men. Bowen saw Einan and shouted to the peasants, "Quickly, run! Run into the trees!" Einan and his knights followed the peasants, but Bowen rode away from them. The king and his men looked for the peasants in the trees. They didn't know that Bowen and hundreds of other peasants were behind them. Suddenly, Bowen shouted out, "Now!" And the peasants began to fight. They threw burning wood down onto Einan's men from behind them. Then hundreds of peasants came out of the trees in front of them, too. "Quickly, back to the castle, or we'll die," shouted Einan. He rode through the fire on his horse, and his men followed. Bowen was near the king. He pulled out his sword and jumped onto Einan's horse. Then he pushed the sword through Einan's heart. But the king didn't stop. He didn't feel the sword. At the same time, Draco suddenly fell from the sky into the castle. Bowen watched and shouted, "No, Draco!" He thought about the dragon's words. "Einan will only die when I'll die." He turned to Kara and said, "Einan didn't feel my sword in his heart, but Draco felt it. Quickly, let's go and help him." Then he and Kara rode to the castle. Einan also watched Draco fall from the sky. He saw his 5 dragon killers jump onto the dragon and pull out their swords. "Stop!" he shouted. "Don't kill him. I don't want the dragon to die. I want him to live, then I'll never die." "No," Draco cried. "Kill me, please." From a window in the castle, the queen looked down at the dragon. She wanted to help him. She ran down the stairs with a knife in her hands. "Come here, Aislinn," Draco said when he saw her. "I've come to help you, Draco," she said sadly. "I've got a knife. I'm going to kill you." "I know," said Draco. "You have to kill me. Then cruel Einan will die. Are the stars shining in the sky tonight, Aislinn?" "Yes, great dragon. They're beautiful," answered the queen. "Then kill me now," said Dragon. But before the queen could do anything, somebody pulled the knife out of her hands. It was Einan. "So, mother, you gave me the 5 dragon killers because you wanted them to kill this dragon," he shouted angrily. "You wanted him to die. And you wanted me to die, too." "Yes, son. I made a mistake when you were a child. I asked the great dragon to help you. But now you're king. You're as cruel as your father. You have to die." Draco listened to the words of mother and son. He couldn't stop Einan, and he couldn't help the queen. Bowen and Kara ran quickly into the castle and found Draco. "Don't try to help me," said the dragon. "I'm tired and I want to die. Then Einan will die too." "But we won the battle," shouted Bowen. "You'll never win," answered Draco. "Kill me, then you'll kill cruel King Einan. Then you'll win." "No, I can't," cried Bowen. "I can't kill you, dear Draco. You're the last dragon in the world." "This is the end for me, Bowen. Kill me," said Draco. "But you're my friend," Bowen said. "So kill me," Draco shouted. Suddenly Einan arrived and Bowen pulled out his sword. He tried to push the sword into the cruel king's heart, but Einan moved away quickly. By mistake, Bowen's sword flew into Draco's heart. Bowen ran to the dragon and pulled it out. Then he turned and pushed it into Einan's heart. The king fell to the ground next to Draco. His eyes closed. Cruel King Einan was dead. Draco looked at Bowen and smiled warmly. Then he closed his eyes. Bowen went down on the ground near his friend. "Are you going to leave us now, Draco? What will we do without you?" Draco answered, "I'm going up to the stars, dear Bowen. to my old dragon friends in the stars. In front of their eyes, the dragon changed to starlight. Then Bowen and Kara watched the dragon's light fly up into the sky, to the other dragon stars. For a minute they couldn't see him, but suddenly they saw a new star in the sky. It was Draco. "Look, Kara," said Bowen. "Look at Draco now. He's the biggest and most beautiful star in the sky."